thing I've done is I've put the throttle all the way forward, which lifts up the reverse gates over the nozzles so they're all the way there. Second thing that I'm doing is now making sure that the wheel's dead center, which I have. You can see the rudder is pretty much center. Then we're checking the nozzle alignment, because this is a twin jet, making sure that both of the nozzles are aligned. And what I'm doing is I'm using a straight edge, and I'm putting the straight edge against the nozzles. You can see that side is lined up pretty well, but then when we go to the other jet, we've got that gap there. So I want to bring this closer in so that it's lined up with the other one. So to do that, we're gonna do the following. We're gonna loosen this bolt, then we're gonna take this off. I believe we're gonna rotate this whole thing, then put the bolt back in and then tighten it. So we'll do that next. All right, again, so to align this nozzle, I want this to come a little more in this way. So I'm going to take this off and then loosen that and then twist the whole thing to shorten it. All right, so what I've done is I've loosened this back nut off. Then I turned this, rotated this a few times to shorten it, kind of where I wanted it. Then I'm going to put it back on here. I'm going to put the bolt through just temporarily to check the alignment of the nozzle. So now we'll use my level again and check the alignment. And you'll notice that that's lined up and that's lined up. So all four are lined up pretty well. All right, so now I'm going to put back in the plastic sleeves. So one goes like that, and the other one just comes in from the bottom. And they kind of stick together just now. Go. Make sure I don't lose my plastic sleeve. It's a little tricky to hold the camera while doing this. Then I'll put the bolt through and then reinstall the washer and the nut. Alright, so just to recap, step one of the Cobra Jet Fin install is making sure that both of the jet nozzles are aligned. To do that, you need to put your throttle all the way forward so the reverse lift gates are all the way up. Then you take a straight edge, in my case a level, you don't need one that's too big, and you line it up against both of them. Get underneath to see if they're lined up. If they're not, if all four edges are not touching the level, then you may have to do this for one or both. In my case, this one that is attached to the keel seemed pretty square, so I left it alone and I only worried about this guy. And to do the alignment, you loosen up this bolt, you take this bolt completely out, then you rotate this whole thing to make this shorter or farther, however you need to do it. Then put the bolt back in and double check your alignment, adjust as needed, keep adjusting, and once you got it perfect, then put the bolt back in, tighten it, tighten this, and you should be good. So now my two nozzles are lined up, and as far as the keel goes, that one's a little trickier. Basically just kind of eyeballing that it was straight, and we'll do adjustments with this too, I believe, later in the install when we put on the second tie rod. So now we're on to step two, which is going to be installing the tie rod. So this is the new tie rod, and this actually wasn't on here, it was in the bag next to it. So we're going to screw this piece onto the tie rod, and then you'll also be looking for this bolt, which is bolt number 9. It's got a hex head, and that's what it looks like. So what we'll be doing is we'll be taking this stock tie rod, we'll be removing this bolt, replacing the longer bolt in this and putting the new tie rod onto this left jet. All right, so to remove this bolt from the tie rod and replace it, it's a 17 millimeter socket. There we go. And after you loosen it, it's pretty loose and comes right out. Alright, and we can see the difference in size. This is the original here on the right, and this is the new one on the left. So now we can remove this guy, it's nice and loose. And we're going to put the new tie rod and install that here on top of this tie rod. So the next thing I'm going to do is put some thread locking compound on to, sorry, I don't know why it's not focusing, there we go. I'm going to put some of this onto just the tip of this bolt that'll be sitting down inside the keel. So I'm going to do that now. And if you can see here, I'm putting the other tie rod through. And then into the keel, and then we'll tighten this bolt up. Alright, so step 3, now that we've got the second tie rod on here and I've adjusted this so that it's positioned pretty much right where it needs to be, and you position it by turning this or turning these. Next, you'll want to get this bolt with these 3 washers and the nut. They came in my package all together already. Then you will want to find the correct this thing geez, whatever that's called. I believe it's called a bracket, and he'll have them labeled right nozzle, left nozzle. This one said left nozzle, this side up, and I just removed the sticker because I'm about to install it. Next thing that you'll want to do is, I'm going to take these off. Set them right there. We are going to have one washer on the bolt. Put it through there. We're going to have another washer that will go on top of the tie rod. Alright, so we've got a washer there, washer there. Then we are going to get our bracket, and don't make the mistake I did of putting the bracket underneath. The bracket goes on top, and if there's any doubt, you see that notch kind of fits into that notch. So that should have been my clue when I was first doing this, and I noticed things didn't line up well because the bracket was hitting the tie rod because I had the bracket underneath. Alright, goes on top, and I feel silly for putting it in the wrong way. Now we're going to put the bolt through the bracket, comes up like that, and then we'll do our final washer. And put the bolt on there real loosely so you can see it. Alright, so bolt, one washer here, tie rod, another washer here. There's no washer in between this. Put the bracket, make sure that you've got it correct as per Jeff's instructions, and then we'll tie this down. I believe it needs Loctite. I'll verify that in a second. Alright, so to loosen this guy up, I am going to be using a 17 millimeter wrench, and then a, what is this? This is a 5/16 Allen wrench for this bolt, and then I will be loosening it up. So I ran into one little challenge here when trying to, so I removed this. I just put the nut back on there just temporarily, and anyway, this bolt isn't coming out. The bolt is like stuck inside of this, so I'm going to get a hammer and try tapping this out to get the bolt to drop. The bolt should just drop out, but it's stuck somehow. All right, so that wasn't that big of a deal. I just to save the bolt, I put the nut back on. So in case I need this bolt again, I didn't damage it. And I gave it a few taps with a hammer, and then it came through, and you can see it's a little tight still, but I can pull it right through. Looks like they used Loctite on on the original stock one as well, so it's good to know. So now that I've got this loose, we are ready to install the new bracket and the new longer bolts and washers and nuts. So again, bolt, 3 washers and a nut. All right, so I've set the bracket on top of the jet there. I've got the bolt, the 2 washers. It was already lined up before, so I'll put that through. And then we'll put the nut on. All right, so now the last thing that I did is I double checked that my tie rods were good by using my level here and making sure that the sides of each of the nozzles are still, all 4 sides are still touching the level, and it was pretty good. And also you got to eyeball it, but making sure that the keel is 90 degrees. Honestly, there's nothing I can use to like use a square or anything. I just kind of close one eye, wink at it, and kind of, like I said, kind of eyeball it. Didn't have any other better way to do it. Then finally I tightened the new tie rod. I never had to loosen up this one. It was already fine. You can see there's a little bit of blue Loctite in there, and I tightened these up, just kind of hand tighten them to, you know, seem on there pretty good. So we are now ready for the next step, which is, I think, removing the sacrificial anode. So we'll do that next. All right, so step 5 is we're repositioning the anode. I assume we're doing it on both pumps. You'll see these are some brackets that we'll use to reposition it. We're repositioning it out of the way so that there's room for the fins. So this is the anode, and we're going to take out these 2 bolts. All right, so we'll just loosen these. This is a 10 millimeter socket. All right, so now that I've removed the anode, what we're actually going to do, this is kind of the flat side, and this is the bumpy side. We're still going to use these bolts, but we are going to put them in what I'll call the bumpy side. All right, so we're just keeping the bolts in the washers. We are just flipping them around. All right, like that. And the anode will end up sitting sort of like this with the bracket. So this will go into the bracket. All right, so right now I'm getting the anode ready. Notice I'm using the original bolts and then the new nuts that were provided. There's not a whole lot of room for them to protrude, but that's okay. They say that's not a problem. We don't want to fully tighten them, just get them tight enough so that we can take the next step. I've got the anode ready with the new brackets, the reused bolts, but the new nuts, the bracket will fit on like this. So I'm going to line it up, and then I'll use these bolts and washers to attach it there. So this is how the new sacrificial anode is positioned with these brackets and with that side out. Finish the left jet's sacrificial anode. You can see the bracket. That is how it should look. I don't think it's a big deal, but I left just enough clearance so it wasn't hitting against whatever that thing is. Now we do the same thing on the other jet. I've already loosened these bolts up, so I can just take it off to show you. All right, so I haven't made them super tight. It's still a little bit loose, but you can see I've got the new nuts on the old bolts for the sacrificial anode. We've got these 2 new brackets on, and it's going to go just like that. All right, so all I need to do now, I've got the right one on. I just need to tighten up. I'm going to tighten up these bolts first. And then I'll tighten up these bolts afterwards. The nuts in them tend to kind of hold themselves, so you can still tighten it, and it doesn't seem like the nut doesn't spin behind it, which is nice. So we get all 4 of those tightened, and that's how it should look on the right jet, and how it looks on the left jet. Now we're ready for the next step, which will be, I believe, putting on the fins. Okay, so now we are going to install the fin. This is the main fin here, and on this kit, this is called the top fin. It's smaller and it goes higher. When we're all done, it will look like this. Here is the top fin, and there's the regular fin, and of course the bracket that goes on the planing surface. We'll attach it here and here, and then we'll use little bolts here and here, and we'll go over that. So install is exactly the same on both jets, and so this jet I haven't done yet, and I'm going to do that now. Again, you'll need the big fin, the top fin. You'll need this bolt with the spacer and a total of 3 washers, and a second one for the other fin. You'll need a slightly longer Allen head bolt and a slightly smaller one. You can see they're a little bit different. And the bigger bolt will actually have 2 washers, and the smaller bolt, which will go to the bottom fin, will not have any washers. So let's get started here. So we're going to work on the main fin. That actually, scratch that. I'm gonna do the main fin that goes on the outside. So I'm gonna loosen up this bolt here using a 12mm socket. Looks like they had some thread locker in this one as well. Take this out, and I'll be very careful to not lose this aluminum sleeve insert. That part stays right in there, so don't lose that because you won't get another one. And you can see this original bolt had some thread locker on it as well. So now we're going to install the fin. We put the fin on. You'll see that I have some thread locker on there. Got the bolt with a washer here, another washer here. We'll take our spacer and put the spacer on, and then one more washer. So this is how it should look. And then remember, we can't lose that guy. You'll put it through here and screw it on. So now we're just taking our Allen wrench and we're tightening this up. You don't have to get it too tight right now. That's fine. And Jeff says not to, in the instructions, not to over tighten it, so that you can always adjust the height of it a little bit easier later. But at the same time, if you're not going to do that, it's not a big deal to tighten it up more too. All right. So now we've got that on. You can see how the bolts look. Next step will be to attach the fin to this bracket. I decided I wanted to have mine a little lower, so I actually put mine in the lowest position, which would be this hole right here. I figured I'd rather have it lower and more of it in the water for better steering, turning at slow speed. Now, with this one, you will have the washer and the longer bolt, unlike the top fin where there won't be a washer. And the reason there's not a washer on the top fin is to allow clearance from the reverse gate that flips down so it doesn't hit that bolt. So you do these a little bit differently, and that's really important to know. So I'm going to get the slightly longer bolt and these two washers. And then on this one, I'm going to stick the bolt in from the outside, just so it looks a little nicer. Sorry for the terrible camera work. And then put a washer on this side. And then we'll get one of the locking nuts. And we'll just put it on like that. So I'm going to tighten that up. And then we'll be ready for the top fin. I'm going to install the top fin. Notice how the top fin goes up above. And we're going to remove this bolt. We'll replace it with a new longer bolt with the washer and the spacer. And then this will go kind of right there. Notice there's a pointy part of it. So the point goes on top and this rounded edge kind of goes on the bottom like that. So let's remove this bolt. Alright, so we're gonna remove this bolt, keep the aluminum spacer in there. On this we won't reuse, we'll just throw that away. So again, we've got our top fin now. Again, the Allen bolt, washer, another washer, spacer, and a washer. And then this will go, sorry, hard to see. This will get threaded into there. Alright, so now I'm just gonna use my Allen wrench here to tighten up this top fin. Alright, there we can see it's tightened on there, and then we'll lower it. Now with this, I think there was only one position I could really, well, looks like I can put it in both positions. So in terms of what position you put it in, I guess that is up to you. On this one I did it on the lower hole, so I'm going to do the same over on this side, and I guess in theory should maybe track a little better in reverse, I don't know. With this top fin, we are only going to use one bolt, one nut, no washers. Again, what's most important with this, more important than anything, is look how there's not a lot of clearance with this reverse gate. So, unlike on this one where I had the nut on the inside, on this one, I need to put the bolt on the inside. If I can get it through there. There we go. So the bolt is on the inside, so that Allen cap on the top of the bolt has the least amount of clearance as possible, or the lowest profile possible, so we'll have more clearance with this. And that's also why there's no washer, and we only put the nut on this side. So now we'll just tighten this up with a 10mm crescent wrench and an Allen wrench, and tighten it up, and we should be good to go. Alright, so we're all done with the install. I'll show you what the final kind of product looks like with kind of a good video so you can see everything. Again, here's the side fin. I installed it in the lower position, right or wrong. There's the bracket. Notice the bolts on the inside of this one, but not on the inside of this one, to keep the clearance for the reverse gate. Here's the second tie rod that we installed, and then pretty much the same thing on this side. And of course there are the sacrificial anodes that we relocated backwards using these brackets. The only thing I had left over with the install, I had 4 extra bolts. I have no idea what they're for. My guess is maybe they included them in case we needed to use them here, but as you can see, I used the original bolts, which is fine. It's fine to use the original bolts here as long as you don't use the original bolts here, because these ones need to be longer. Another thing to point out is you really kind of only have one chance to do your alignment, because once you put these on, these fins will be in the way, so you can't hold a level across all 2 nozzles to do an alignment. So I'm glad I did that first, because otherwise I'd have to take these off again to do it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to test movement of the steering wheel to just make sure that the keel and you know, both jets are turning correctly. Then I'm going to put the shifter into full reverse to make sure I've got proper clearance here, and there's no problems there. So that's what I'm gonna do next. So you can see I tested the steering wheel. These are all the way, with it all the way to the right. Movement, everything's normal, nothing's hitting, no concerns. In retrospect, I think I'm gonna lower these down one. I think lower in the water is, I don't know, in my opinion, better, in my uneducated opinion. And now I'm gonna check the reverse gates. All right, so here you can see I put the reverse gates all the way down by shifting the shifter all the way into reverse as far as it would go. They're completely down, and there's plenty of clearance on this side and this side. No issues, everything turned and shifted smoothly. You can see there's not a lot of clearance, but there's still more than enough. All right, so that's about it. I am all done with my install of the Cobra Jet steering system AK-19 Deluxe on a 2020 Yamaha AR210. This is the final outcome. Everything went pretty well. One last thing I did is, because I didn't really want to have the stickers on, is I pre-peeled them and then stuck them back on so that I would know, you know, where things go to help with orientation. But then it makes it easy to just peel it right off later. No offense to Jeff, but I like the way that it looks kind of without the stickers. Just looks a little more stock. But otherwise, now it's just time to test it out on the water.